Welcome back. You're watching Trade of the Week. Today we bring you a technical analysis on AVI, Curro, Glencore and Coronation. Hedge Fund Manager at Unum Capital, Loyiso Mpeta, joins us with that analysis. Thank you so much for your time, Loyiso. Let's start off with food, fish and feet. That is AVI. Of course, it's always such a strange combo, the food and the shoe businesses together there under AVI. But they seem to be managing it well, except maybe for the fish part. So just enlighten us on the technical analysis then, also considering the fact that we haven't looked at this one in a while.
Yeah, no, we haven't. So just to recap, we last looked at it around May of 2021. And at that stage, there were still rumors of a potential takeover. And that kind of created some volatility in the share price. But what I did emphasize back then was looking at this bear market from 2018 to 2020, and I said it's characteristic of a triple zigzag, which I labeled WXYXZ, which bottomed at 59.39, and I kind of made a case that a bottom is probably in at 59.39, and then I was bullish also on the prospect of the takeover. But then when that didn't happen, the share kind of collapsed, and I think we just kind of lost interest in it for a long time. But taking a look at it over the weekend, something very interesting came to my attention. So funny enough, that bottom in 2020 still held at 59.39. And we can see this is that volatility that was created by that potential takeover. And then there was a strong sell-off when that didn't happen. But price managed to hold at 60 Rand 48. And then there was another bit of a rally and another sell-off, which also held at 60 Rand 60. So what these three bottoms created is a very strong support zone. But because all three of these bottoms are at or around the same price, they give a bullish reversal pattern known as a triple bottom. So we get a double bottom, and this is a triple bottom. So the question now is, seeing how strong the stock has rallied over the last year or so, is now still a good time to buy. So using the triple bottom price projection, which is we take price from this neckline to the bottom of the support range, and then projecting it from the breakout, what we have is a price target which is very close to the all-time high at 123.50. So there's still some upside potential from a textbook price forecast perspective. But I must say, looking at how strong the momentum is and how strong the fundamentals are, we should or we could see a new all-time high in AVI in the short term. And I think also when you look at the results that they just released recently for the financial year end 2023 or 2024, it was, I think, one of the two.
24.
24. I mean, fantastic results. You know, look at the fact that even though they had single-digit revenue growth, all the other profit margins were double digits in excess of 20%. So what that tells me is, in terms of cost management, very efficient. And what AVI management has always been renowned for is their ability to sort of balance the pricing versus the volume. So when they suffer volumes, they have this pricing power where they can pass on the price to the consumer and still maintain very, very good margins. And again, with this backdrop of INJ not performing optimally, still having issues with the ports, challenges with the poor catch rates, and also the abalone industry struggling. Once you start factoring good performance there as well, you can only expect further growth in revenues and margins as well. So from a fundamental perspective, very, very solid, strong cash flow generation, strong reduction in net debt. So I'm very bullish on AVI in the short to medium term.
Yeah, quite a lot of things that investors are crossing their fingers for. Of course, you mentioned, because we do know that the fish business is quite cyclical. So if we get to an upward cycle there and also a environment of sustained lower inflation and lower interest rates, things should be looking good there for AVI.
No, very much so, very much.
All right. Well, let's take a look at the education sector. One of the counters there, Curro. Actually, the whole sector has performed quite well in the last reporting period, coming out with the results, I think, this month or last month. And Curro being one of those, even in a very difficult economic environment for the parents. What does the technical picture there look like?
Curro is quite an interesting one, you know, and also one we haven't looked at in a long time. So I thought let's just have a look at the holistic picture from when it first listed. Very, very strong, aggressive rally from listing, hitting that all-time high back in 2015. But then this was followed by a very strong 5-year bear market, which bottomed in March 2020. And from that March 2020 low, price has been relatively subdued, especially when you look at the outperformance of an AVI, of an Advertech, and also Stadio has also outperformed relative to Curro. So the question is a bottom in at 462, and how can we interpret this price from a trend perspective? So looking at this big bearish structure, I'm looking at it as an ABC zigzag. And I'm saying a bottom is probably in at 462. So this is our key invalidation level. So taking a closer look from this March 2020 low, this first rally up to 1450, I'm looking at it as wave 1, followed by a pullback for wave 2, which bottomed at 7 Rand 2 cents. So I'm looking at this current advance as the early stages of a wave 3 of the same degree as this wave 1 and wave 2. So I'm looking at it as currently wave 1, wave 2, and currently in the early stages of this larger wave 3. So from a technical perspective, there are some bullish signs, and also, like you say, you know, the most recent performance showed strong growth in terms of the numbers, but there's always been an underlying sense of how much more growth can Curro really deliver, where it is now, also looking at its capex expenditure throughout the years. The net debt went just below 3 times net debt to EBITDA last year, but has now popped back above 3.3, I think, somewhere around there. So debt has always been something a bit of a concern for investors and
because
and
of
sentiment.
That capex push.
Exactly. You know? So again, the question is how much more growth can investors expect from Curro? So I think that's the real fundamental story that.
Because now they need to fill that capacity that they've built. All right. Very, very interesting. Let's go into mining. Loyiso, Glencore, diversified miner there. You did speak about this one earlier on this year. What did you see then, and what has happened since then?
Yeah, so I thought Glencore presents a very good opportunity right now, hence thought it's best to have a look at it again. Last time we touched on it was around May this year. And after this very strong 5-wave advance from March 2020 to this peak in January, I looked at this correction as an ABC zigzag, which was contained in this very clear downward sloping channel. And the price projection was further downside and monitoring price at this lower support line of the channel for wave C. So the structure itself hasn't changed, but what I noticed was the B wave, which I had here previously, sort of evolved into an expanding flat. So the B wave now, I'm labeling it as an A, B, C. So it's still 3 waves, but the pattern evolved from a simple flat to a more complex expanding flat. And now I'm saying that the C wave is now at the lower support trend line. So that forecast I had of looking for wave C to potentially terminate at the lower trend line, that's where price is. And what's interesting, when I look at this C wave in more detail, it has also unfolded in a very, very clear textbook 5-wave decline. So the question is a bottom in at 84.31? So still early to have high conviction, but looking at the wave structure going down, high probability that 84.31 could be the bottom, or the bottom is very close. But what will give me some conviction would be a break above this wave 4 peak at 97.85. So I think Glencore is at a very, very interesting juncture from a technical perspective. But again, I have to say, when you look at this more prolonged, relatively shallow correction in context of how strong this rally is, the last interim results and annual results have really been one of significant underperformance.
Yeah.
When you look at their portfolio commodities, not your typical gold and platinum, but your zincs, cobalts, copper, coal.
Yes.
And now they've also increased their exposure to coal with the acquisition of that 77% stake in Elk Valley Resources, which again...
And now they're not even separating it from...
Yeah, exactly, because that was one of the discussions, whether to spin off the coal business and have it separate, but they've decided to retain the coal business as well, and we know how depressed the coal price has been.
Yeah.
So, with the commodity or the cyclical nature of commodities, if we start to see an uptick in those portfolio commodity prices and looking at where the price is from a technical perspective, I think a significant bottom could be in, or at least close to being in Glencore. So I'll be definitely looking at that key level of 84.31. But from a technical perspective, looking very good. Cyclical commodities prices that can turn around anytime. So I think it's a question of timing more than anything.
And that's the thing, because investors are always looking for the bottom, and just when they think that they found it, it just surprises you.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So let's go into asset management. Coronation, they're one of the more favored ones in that space. Just take us through that, because I imagine that there have been a number of sell-offs because of the volatility in the markets, looking at the fact that they're heavily influenced by the markets and market sentiment. But also they had an issue specific to them, a tax issue that they were dealing with SARS.
Yeah. So again, let's just do a quick recap from the last time we looked at Coronation back in 2023. Very, very strong bear market from 2014 to 2020, and then we had this strong rally from the March 2020 bottom. And I looked at this pullback as a potential bottom, and I forecasted some upside. So just zooming in on that rally from March 2020, I labeled it as a 5-wave advance, which was a very bullish outlook. And then I looked at that sell-off to 29 Rand as wave 2, and then gave a very bullish forecast on Coronation. But what we have seen from this low here has been a very, very shallow consolidation, sideways movement, which created a very strong support zone between 28.68 and just above 30 Rand a share. And what this does give us is a technical pattern known as a rounding bottom. But with the tax issue as well, what is very positive for me is during this whole consolidation period, this is when the tax issue was sort of hovering around the company. And when you have an issue like that and the stock consolidates instead of sell off, it kind of tells me that the market doesn't want to dump the stock anymore. They're just looking for good news.
I've got the same sentiment when I was talking to a number of analysts during that period.
So that's how I look at it. And we can see after that was set aside, we did have a bit of a rally in the stock. So I'm looking at this key level of 28.68 as a potential bottom in the short term, and then further upside. But then again, like with Curro, the question is, from a fundamental perspective, where is growth going to come from? For a very long time, Coronation has been almost stagnant in terms of their AUM, which then feeds into stagnation as well in terms of their revenues, which is from the management and performance fees. And looking at their latest results, I think their revenue grew about 4.6%, so very, very low single digits. So again, as much as the technical picture looks promising, the question that investors need to ask is, where is growth going to come from? What's going to be the fundamental driver for further upside? Because, I mean, for the last, 5-6 years, the stock really has underperformed.
Yeah, that's really, really quite interesting. But also, are there no signs with the markets, I mean, with what we've been talking about, with lower inflation, lower interest rates, that maybe there could be more upside for the markets that maybe could then filter through to Coronation, or is it just more layered than that?
I think it's a bit more layered than that, because more than anything, you know, as much as you can have a fixed revenue component in management fees, the question then is, what about performance fees? And that is something that the investment team is responsible for. You can't look at external factors as a catalyst. So I think that's another thing that will weigh on investors, you know. And sometimes, you know, with these very, very big fund managers, it's very difficult to sort of generate that outperformance when you've got such a large asset base. Whereas you're more nimble, smaller, can you know, do something in the market to sort of generate that alpha. So I think that's going to be the main thing now, is where is that growth going to come from?
Well, at least investors can hold on to their special dividend. They did declare a special dividend.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, because of the turnaround in the tax issue. Well, yeah, thank you for that, Loyiso. Really, really appreciate it. That was Loyiso Mpeta, Hedge Fund Manager at Unum Capital.